The flames lit up the night like judgment itself, orange tongues tearing through the greenhouse Martha built with her bare hands, each crack of glass like a scream. Townspeople stood around the fire, some smirking, some pretending to be shocked, while she stood trembling in her apron, watching every dream she dared to believe in turn to ash. Behind her, James clenched his fists, his face streaked with soot and fury, his voice low. "No, you do belong here." But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The train exhaled a final hiss of steam and metal as if exhausted from its long journey through the scorched marrow of America. Its arrival stirred little excitement, only the thin rustle of newspaper pages, the idle nudge of boots against the platform's boards. Yet a current of anticipation ran beneath the monotony. They had been waiting, not for the train, but for her. Martha Lee stepped down with cautious grace, her shoes barely skimming the step, as though mindful that any misstep might shatter what little resolve she had left. The Arizona sun hit her like a verdict, pulling sweat through the cotton of her dress before she could even blink. Still, she kept her shoulders straight. Her hands clutched a suitcase whose leather handle had long since frayed. The initials, ML, were barely visible beneath years of wear and hope. Then came the silence, brief but loud. Heads tilted, brows arched. Someone let out a whistle, long and low. "She's bigger than the baggage car," a boy said, loud enough for a ripple of laughter to follow. Martha did not flinch. Not yet. She scanned the crowd with searching eyes, pale blue and rimmed with the fatigue of travel and trepidation. She found him, Henry Wilkins, standing stiffly beneath the station awning. His jaw slackened the moment he laid eyes on her. One heartbeat passed, then another. Without a word, he pivoted on a dusty heel and vanished into the human fog, shame clinging to him like humidity. That was the moment Martha's chin faltered. The first tear didn't fall, but it welled, anchored to the edge of dignity. She remained rooted on the platform, an unwanted gift still wrapped in hope. The laughter crescendoed now. Words like whale, mountain, and mistake floated around her like flies drawn to vulnerability. None of them considered the distance she had traveled. None saw the letter in her pocket, the one she had read so many times the folds had gone soft. None saw the woman who, just a week ago, stood in front of a mirror whispering, "You are enough," as she buttoned her best dress. But one man did. Leaning against the station's rusted water tower, James Carter watched with a gaze sharp enough to cut through cruelty. His arms were crossed, boots dusted from the trail. He didn't speak. He didn't smirk. But his eyes stayed on Martha, not with pity, not with hunger, but with recognition, and perhaps with something else. She was alone, but not unseen. James Carter had long since learned that some things are better left unsaid, not because they didn't matter, but because words too often got twisted on the wind. In war, he'd watched good men die waiting for the right thing to be spoken. Since then, he'd relied on what could be done, not what could be declared. That's why, when Martha sat beneath the blistering sun with her pride peeling like old paint, he didn't offer comfort wrapped in platitudes. He simply removed his wide-brimmed hat and placed it gently on her head. "They're fools," he said, voice low and steady. "And I think you're braver than any man I served beside." Martha blinked, startled. For a moment, she didn't look at him, afraid perhaps to look up and see ridicule on a new face. But James's tone carried no mockery, no condescension, just truth. Hard, stripped-down truth. It wasn't flattery. It wasn't kindness for show. It was recognition, and it was rare. He didn't press her when she didn't answer. Instead, he did what no one else had. He sat beside her, not towering over, not leaning in with a whisper meant to sting, just a man choosing to share a bench with a woman the town had cast aside like old fruit. In the days that followed, James didn't bring promises. He brought nails, a hammer, a sack of green bean seeds, and a dusty copy of A Tale of Two Cities. He found the abandoned schoolhouse and patched its sagging roof. He swept out the rat droppings and pried the boards off its broken windows. When Martha's hands trembled as she helped, he never took the task from her. He handed her the better end of the tool. It wasn't long before Martha's silence began to soften, her steps less hesitant. She asked questions. She laughed, once, sharp and sudden, like a fire catching. But the town saw it too, and what they couldn't mock, they feared. Their cruelty evolved, laced now with jealousy. "He's a broken man," they muttered. She saw his loneliness and pounced. James heard the rumors. They stuck to him like the dust on his boots. Still, he returned to the schoolhouse each morning, bringing fresh water, sprouting cuttings, and the morning news from Yuma. And when he traced the black tar letters, "Pig Farm," scrawled across the door one evening, he didn't rage. He simply scrubbed, quietly, slowly, until his knuckles bled. Then he painted over it in the same green Martha had picked for the window frames, the same shade as spring. The first scream came from a child, high, shrill, not of fear but of spectacle. Then came the flicker, a curl of orange that licked the blackened sky from the edge of the schoolhouse's makeshift greenhouse. Within moments, it roared. Glass panes cracked in rapid succession, each shatter like a slap across Martha's face. Flames clawed skyward, hungry, triumphant, devouring rows of delicate seedlings, trellised vines, and the fragile warmth of effort stitched day by day with calloused hands and cautious hope. The smell was thick. Acrid smoke and scorched soil mingled with the ghost of lavender and thyme. Martha stood frozen on the edge of the crowd, her body locked but trembling, as if caught in a silent scream. Her apron was still dusted with flour from the morning's baking. She had been kneading bread, humming under her breath, when the crackling outside began. Around her, the townspeople had gathered like moths. Some feigned concern, hands on hips and slow shakes of the head, but others didn't bother pretending. One man chuckled through a mouthful of tobacco, spitting toward the flames. A woman elbowed her neighbor and muttered, "Guess pigs can't garden after all." Laughter, real, unashamed, spread like a second fire through the crowd. Martha's lips parted, her voice no louder than a prayer. "I should leave. I don't belong here." James turned slowly, his face smeared with ash, eyes bloodshot from smoke and rage. He hadn't spoken since the fire started. Not when he beat at the flames with a wet blanket, not when the glass cut across his palms. But now his voice was iron-wrapped in grief. "No, you do. This town doesn't deserve you. But maybe, just maybe, it needs you." He didn't wait for permission. The next morning he returned to the charred ruin with a shovel and a plank of wood. His hands blistered as he cleared the debris, alone at first, until a pair of small feet appeared beside him. One of the Parker boys, holding a pail. "For the dirt," he said. Behind him, the town librarian arrived with a box of rescued books. Then the blacksmith with nails and quiet nods. One by one, not many, but enough. The greenhouse rose again. Not the same, but stronger. Built from shared sweat, from spite turned into fuel. And above the new door, hand-painted in bold, unwavering strokes, hung a sign. "Martha's Hope. Healing grows here." A name not of apology, but of defiance. The river murmured beneath the ancient oak like an old friend whispering blessings. Its twisted roots cradled the earth where a makeshift altar had been set, simple, honest, adorned with wildflowers gathered at dawn by hands both young and old. The air smelled of honeysuckle and memory, of soil and rebirth. The townsfolk gathered in quiet clusters, fidgeting, murmuring, this time not with cruelty, but with awe. A year had passed since the fire. A long, hard year that had rewritten unspoken laws in the town's marrow, and now they stood witness, not to a spectacle, but to a reckoning. James waited beneath the oak, shoulders square, face unshaven but clean. He wore his best shirt, frayed at the cuffs, starched at the collar. His eyes never left the path winding from the schoolhouse to the river bend, a path now strewn with petals of golden daisies and bright cornflowers, the handiwork of children who once called Martha names and now called her Miss Martha, with reverence. When she stepped into view, there was no music, only the gasp of breath drawn collectively. Martha Lee walked slow, unhurried, each step measured like a hymn. Her dress shimmered in the sunlight, a patchwork of satin and love, sewn over months by the very hands that once pointed and mocked. It fit her not by accident, but by intention, tailored to the curve of a woman no longer apologizing for her shape. Her hair was swept back with a pin James had carved himself, inlaid with a single river stone. Her bouquet was wild, lavender, rosemary, bluebells, scents of hope, healing, and defiance. Among the guests stood Henry Wilkins, stiff as a fence post, red-faced and alone. He had not been invited, but he had come, drawn by the weight of what he had given up, what he had never truly seen. He stayed back, behind the rows, his regret silent and corrosive. As Martha reached James, the hush deepened. No preacher, no bells, just a nod from the blacksmith, now deputized in spirit, if not by law. And then James took her hand, not fragile, not tentative. He held it as one might hold something sacred. When their lips met, the applause rose, not the raucous kind, but something gentler, the kind of sound made when wrongs begin to right themselves. Even the sheriff, once indifferent, tipped his hat. In that moment, the town no longer saw a fat bride. They saw a woman who had endured the furnace and emerged unburned. They saw two souls bound not by appearances or convenience, but by shared scars and the grace to keep going. And James? He smiled, fully, freely. The kind of smile that says, "We made it." Because out of ridicule, out of flame and tar and whispered slurs, they had grown something indestructible, something the wind could not scatter. Love, real and unshakable, rooted like the oak.